Welcome to my American History Notes, where I discuss conclusions I've drawn from studying American history. Conclusions you won't necessarily agree with, but you should know about the topics I discuss and much, much more to be conversant in American history. We're going to begin today. I'm going to talk about Herbert Hoover's administration, and we'll start. No American president came to the White House with a more impressive array of accomplishments and left with more bitterness than Herbert Hoover, who served as the 31st president from 1929 to 1933. It was his first and last elective office, although he served his country tirelessly for more than 50 years. He was an orphan who became a successful mining engineer and a millionaire by the time he was 40. During World War I, he headed a committee that helped more than 100,000 stranded Americans get home, oversaw the relief of starving people in German occupied Belgium as the chairman for the Commission for Relief in Belgium, was the United States Food Administrator under Wilson, being responsible for stabilizing food prices and food distribution, proposed an excess profits tax, became the chairman for the Allied Food Council, and was hailed as a great humanitarian in an era that began America's belief that the salvation of the world rested on its shoulders. Hoover had supported the League of Nations, had been suggested for president in 1920, had been asked to be Harding to be Secretary of the Interior, but served as Secretary of Commerce during Harding and Coolidge's administrations, working to improve child health and eliminate child labor, helped to reduce the workday from 12 to 8 hours as Wilson had wanted, and did a great deal to preserve and build dams, flood control, and hydroelectric plants around the nation. He was very active in social welfare. John Barry's Rising Tide chronicles Hoover's involvement in the reconstruction of the Mississippi Delta after the Great Flood of 1927. His rosy optimism was crushed by the stock market crash of October 1929. Soon, 12 million Americans were out of work and businesses by the thousands were going bankrupt. The quote, roaring 20s, a time of excess, fortunes made, and great optimism for the future of America and the world was over. In desperation, he launched into public works programs and lowered the income tax, but opposed federal relief to the mass of unemployed. The Bonus Act of 1931, giving billions of dollars of relief to veterans, had to be passed over his veto. The midterm election of 1930 saw the Republican majority in Congress nearly wiped out. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act raised protective tariffs to an all-time high and an interference with the free market that deepened and continued the Great Depression for many years. In the spring of 1932, thousands of World War I veterans marched on Washington as, quote, the bonus army. They and their families lived in shacks on the outskirts in what was called, quote, Hooverville. Hoover had the army under General Douglas MacArthur remove the veterans and their families and burn the shacks they had built. No one was surprised by the election of the Democrat Roosevelt. We're going to discuss the Depression and the causes of its lingering and later on. It was a very difficult time to live, and poverty was everywhere. Men, if they could find work, were barely able to feed their families, and many times families broke up trying to survive. People had to learn to make do with almost nothing. This was the generation of many of our grandfathers and great grandfathers who can tell you stories of how hard it was to live. Decades of poor cultivation practices on the Great Plains, coupled with climate change, created a dust bowl where topsoil blew away and farms were wiped out. Thousands of farm families had to emigrate from places like Oklahoma to California. However, one of the greatest proponents as the government as the solution to America's problems he was Hoover. Hoover was one of the great proponents of the government as solution to America's problems. Did leave us with this warning as he saw Roosevelt's administration expand government's role. Quote, we do not extend the mastery of government over the daily life of a people without somewhere making it master of people's souls and thoughts. Next, we're going to talk about FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and we'll continue this later. Thank you very much.